Your soulmate just heard the truth about you, and they were completely shocked. Something slipped into the conversation at the exact moment nobody expected it, and the expression on your soulmate's face changed so quickly that even the person speaking stopped mid-sentence. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a single truth, spoken almost casually, yet it carried the weight of years. For a few silent seconds, they simply stared into the distance, as if the world around them had disappeared. What could someone have said that left them completely speechless? And why did that truth suddenly make every unanswered feeling inside them begin to make sense? Stay close, because the next few moments reveal a story almost nobody sees until it's already changing their future. It began in an ordinary place. A quiet afternoon. Soft conversations drifting through the room. Your soulmate wasn't expecting anything unusual. They were listening without really listening, their thoughts already somewhere else. Then someone mentioned your name. The atmosphere shifted almost invisibly. Their attention sharpened. A smile faded into curiosity. Then came the sentence that nobody planned to say. You don't really know who they are, do you? Silence followed. Not because there wasn't more to say, but because everyone suddenly realized the conversation had reached a place where there was no turning back. Your soulmate leaned forward without even noticing. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last. They had believed they already understood you. They thought they had gathered enough pieces to see the full picture. But they were about to discover that almost everything they assumed had been incomplete. Before another word was spoken, they caught themselves wondering. What if the version of you they had been holding onto wasn't the real one at all? Don't look away yet, because the next revelation changes everything they thought they knew. The voice across from them remained calm, almost gentle. There were no dramatic accusations. No shocking secrets. Instead, the truth arrived through small moments, stories that had never reached your soulmate before. They learned about quiet acts of kindness that nobody celebrated. Times when you chose patience instead of recognition. Moments when you carried disappointment without letting it become bitterness. They heard about dreams you had quietly protected while encouraging everyone else around you. One memory led to another until an entirely different image of you began forming before their eyes. The person they thought they understood suddenly became deeper, stronger, and far more remarkable than they had imagined. They replayed every conversation they'd ever had with you, searching for clues they had somehow missed. Hidden meanings surfaced. Forgotten smiles suddenly made sense. Even the pauses between your words felt different now. And then another unexpected detail emerged, something so personal, so beautifully human, that your soulmate instinctively lowered their eyes, overwhelmed not with sadness, but with genuine admiration. How had they failed to notice all of this before? Why had nobody told them sooner? Keep following this path, because the next discovery is the one they never saw coming. As evening settled in, they found themselves walking alone beneath fading sunlight, unable to escape the thoughts racing through their mind. Every step brought another realization. They weren't simply shocked by what they had learned about you. They were shocked by how much they had underestimated the quiet strength hidden beneath your ordinary moments. They began recognizing a pattern that had been there all along. Every unexpected encounter. Every conversation that lingered in memory. Every coincidence that kept bringing your paths together. None of it felt accidental anymore. Something inside them shifted, not loudly, but permanently. For the first time, they wondered if destiny had been giving them opportunities they almost overlooked because they were searching for something obvious instead of something real. But just when they believed they had finally uncovered the entire truth, someone sent a message containing one final piece of the story, a detail that explained why your name had surfaced that day in the first place. The screen lit up. They read the first line. Their breathing slowed. And in that single unforgettable moment, they realized the biggest truth about you had still not been revealed. A single unanswered message became impossible to ignore. And before your soulmate could put the phone away, they opened it again, reading every word more slowly this time. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a dramatic announcement. It was something much different lives. Yet the conclusion never changed. You had a way of making people feel seen without asking for anything in return. You carried hope into conversations that others had already given up on. And even during your own uncertain seasons, you somehow became a source of strength for someone else. Your soulmate sat there in complete silence, realizing this wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a pattern. The more they learned, the more they questioned how someone so extraordinary had remained hidden in plain sight. Stay with this, because the next realization reached far deeper than they expected. As the evening unfolded, they couldn't resist revisiting old memories. They remembered moments that once seemed ordinary, a brief laugh you shared, a thoughtful question you asked, the calm way you handled awkward silence. Back then, those moments slipped by unnoticed. Now they carried entirely different meaning. It was as though someone had adjusted the focus on a camera, revealing details that had always been there but had never been truly seen. They even found themselves smiling unexpectedly, remembering little things they had forgotten for months. Suddenly they understood why your conversation stayed in their thoughts long after they ended. Why your absence sometimes felt louder than your presence. And why every attempt to move on emotionally always seemed incomplete. They weren't simply discovering new information about you, they were discovering how deeply your influence had already become part of their own story. Before the night was over, they quietly admitted something to themselves that they had never been brave enough to say before. Maybe the person they had been searching for had been standing closer than they ever realized. If this story is touching something in your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from in the comments. Someone else may connect with your journey too. And if you're enjoying this unfolding story, subscribing helps you catch every chapter as it arrives. Then came another unexpected turn. The following morning, your soulmate crossed paths with someone who knew both of you. It wasn't planned. It almost didn't happen at all. During an ordinary conversation, your name came up once again. This time, however, the person smiled before speaking. "There's one thing about them almost nobody notices," they said. Your soulmate listened carefully, expecting another compliment. Instead, they heard something that completely changed the direction of their thoughts. They learned that you had quietly walked away from opportunities simply because they didn't align with your values. That you chose authenticity over attention. That you protected your peace instead of chasing approval. These weren't dramatic stories that made headlines. They were quiet choices that revealed remarkable character. Your soulmate felt an unexpected sense of respect growing inside them. Suddenly they understood that your greatest qualities weren't the ones visible on the surface, they were the ones you never tried to prove. That realization lingered long after the conversation ended. As the sun dipped lower, they found themselves standing still, watching people pass by while their mind raced ahead. Every new truth about you seemed to answer one question while creating another. If everything they had heard was real, why had fate waited until now to reveal it? Why did these pieces arrive only after they had nearly convinced themselves to stop wondering about you? One final detail still remained hidden. Somewhere, someone was holding a memory about you that your soulmate had never heard before, a memory capable of connecting every clue into one breathtaking picture. They had no idea that before another day would end, they were about to hear those words, and nothing about the way they saw your future together would ever feel the same again. The next voice they heard carried no urgency at all, and somehow, that made every word feel even more important. It came from someone who had known you for a long time, someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone or influence anyone. They simply smiled when your name came up and said, "Most people misunderstand them at first." Your soulmate froze for a second. Those 6 words echoed louder than anything else they had heard. What did they mean? Had everyone been seeing only the surface while the real story remained hidden underneath? Without realizing it, they leaned in, completely focused. There was no turning back now. Every answer seemed to uncover an even greater mystery. Keep watching closely, because this next piece may explain why your paths keep crossing in ways neither of you can fully understand. The conversation unfolded slowly, almost like someone opening an old journal one page at a time. They spoke about how you rarely tried to prove yourself. How you preferred actions over promises. They remembered times when others misunderstood. They couldn't help but ask themselves how many opportunities they had missed simply because they hadn't been looking closely enough. Then another unexpected sentence arrived. The strongest part of them isn't what they say, it's what they choose not to say. That line stayed with your soulmate long after the conversation moved on. It explained the calm confidence they had always sensed around you but never fully understood. There was one detail you haven't noticed yet, because the next discovery connected everything in a way no one expected. Later that afternoon, something completely unplanned happened. While organizing a few old belongings, your soulmate came across a small reminder of a moment involving you. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply something that brought back a conversation they hadn't thought about in months. They stood there smiling without realizing it. Then they remembered exactly how that conversation had ended. You had said something encouraging at a time when they desperately needed to hear it, yet you never waited for recognition afterward. Back then, they accepted those words and moved on. Now they understood their real value. Those weren't casual sentences. They were evidence of the person everyone had been describing. Quiet strength. Honest compassion. Steady character. Piece by piece, the truth continued building itself without anyone forcing it. It felt natural. Genuine. Impossible to ignore. They finally admitted something that surprised even them. Perhaps they had spent too much time searching for perfection, while the most meaningful connection had been growing through authenticity all along. As twilight settled across the sky, they sat alone with one question they couldn't answer. If everything they had learned was true, then why did it feel as though this story wasn't ending, but only beginning? At that exact moment, another notification appeared on their phone. It wasn't from someone they expected. It contained only a few simple lines, but those lines referred to an event connected to you that had happened long before you ever met. Your soulmate's expression changed instantly. They read it once. Then again. Suddenly they realized there was one chapter of your life they had never even imagined, and that hidden chapter might explain why meeting you never felt like an ordinary coincidence. The next revelation wasn't just about your past, it was about a choice that could quietly shape both of your futures forever. A forgotten memory suddenly found its way back, not because anyone went looking for it, but because the timing was finally right. Your soulmate opened the message with quiet curiosity, expecting another simple story. Instead, they found themselves reading about a chapter of your life that almost nobody ever talked about. It wasn't filled with grand achievements or dramatic moments. It was a season where you quietly kept moving forward while very few people noticed how much you were carrying. The words painted a picture of resilience instead of recognition. Of patience instead of applause. And for the first time, your soulmate understood that your greatest victories had happened long before anyone was there to celebrate them. They weren't shocked because your past was extraordinary. They were shocked because your strength had always been so beautifully ordinary that it never demanded attention. Stay with this, because the next realization revealed something even more personal. The more they reflected, the more everything began connecting. They remembered the way you never rushed people. The way you listened without interrupting. The calm confidence you carried into difficult conversations. None of those qualities appeared overnight. They had been shaped by experiences that taught you empathy instead of judgment. Suddenly, your soulmate stopped wondering whether the stories they had heard were true. They already knew the answer. Every conversation they had ever shared with you now fit together like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place. There was no single dramatic revelation anymore. It was something far more convincing. It was consistency. Every person described you differently, yet somehow every description pointed toward the same heart. Your soulmate smiled to themselves, realizing that the truth wasn't hidden because you wanted it to be. It had remained hidden because you had never felt the need to announce it. If this journey has made you think about someone special in your own life, you're always welcome to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've been enjoying every twist of this story, subscribing is a simple way to stay with us for what comes next. Just when they believed they had finally understood everything, one final conversation changed the direction once again. Someone looked at your soulmate and quietly asked, "Have you ever noticed how different they become around people they truly trust?" That single question lingered in the air. Your soulmate searched their memory. They remembered rare moments when your laughter came more easily. Times when your guard quietly disappeared. Those moments hadn't been random, they were signs of comfort, of genuine connection. A realization settled over them that was impossible to ignore. They hadn't simply learned new facts about you. They had been invited to see the version of you that only a few people ever experienced. And suddenly, that felt like an incredible privilege rather than a coincidence. Night arrived, but sleep refused to come. Instead, your soulmate found themselves staring out the window, replaying every word they had heard over the last 2 days. The shock they first felt had transformed into admiration. Admiration had quietly become gratitude. And gratitude was beginning to grow into something even deeper, something they weren't quite ready to name. Yet one mystery still remained untouched. There was one truth about you that nobody else could explain because it wasn't written in stories or remembered in conversations. It could only be discovered the next time your soulmate looked into your eyes and heard your own voice. Without realizing it, they made a quiet promise to themselves. The next meeting wouldn't be left to chance. Because after hearing the truth about you, they knew there was one conversation they could no longer postpone, and what happens when that moment finally arrives may become the most unforgettable chapter of all. The quiet promise they made that night refused to fade with the morning light, it only became stronger. When they woke up, the world looked exactly the same, yet something inside them had completely changed. They weren't searching for more stories about you anymore. They weren't waiting for someone else to explain who you were. For the first time, they wanted to discover the rest directly from you. That realization caught them off guard. After everything they had heard, they understood that second-hand truths could only go so far. If they truly wanted to know your heart, they would have to step into a real conversation. But before that chance could arrive, one final surprise appeared in the most unexpected place. Stay with this, because this moment quietly shifted the direction of everything. Later that day, while going about an ordinary routine, your soulmate overheard someone mentioning your name again. They almost kept walking, but something made them pause. This wasn't another long story or emotional speech. It was a simple observation from someone who had recently spent time with you. "They haven't changed," the person said with a smile. "No matter what's happening around them, they're still the same thoughtful person they've always been." Those words landed differently than all the others. Your soulmate realized that character isn't proven in perfect moments, it reveals itself through consistency. The truth about you wasn't built on one impressive event. It was reflected in countless ordinary days, in quiet decisions nobody applauded. That was what had shocked them from the beginning. In a world where so many people tried to appear extraordinary, you had simply chosen to be genuine. And somehow, that authenticity carried more power than anything they had ever expected. Before they walked away, another sentence followed almost casually. If they care about someone, they never stop wishing the best for them. Your soulmate felt those words settle deep inside their heart. As the afternoon faded into evening, they found themselves standing in front of a familiar place where your paths had crossed before. The surroundings hadn't changed, but they had. Every memory now carried new meaning. They could almost hear echoes of conversations they once thought were ordinary. They remembered moments when you encouraged them without expecting recognition. They remembered your quiet confidence, your steady kindness, and the way you always seemed fully present whenever someone needed to be heard. Suddenly, they realized something that surprised them more than anything else. The greatest truth they had learned wasn't about your past. It wasn't about what others had said. It was about how your presence had already changed them in small ways they never noticed until now. They had become more patient, more thoughtful, more hopeful. Without realizing it, your influence had quietly become part of their own journey. Just as they prepared to leave, their phone vibrated one more time. It wasn't a dram.